Okay, welcome everyone to this event. I'm Anne Dekker. I'm Program Manager Gender Peace Security at Women Equals Men Dutch Gender Platform, and I will be your moderator for this session. As you might know, this event is part of a series of virtual dialogues that Cordaid and the Civil Society Platform for Peace Building and State Building are jointly hosting to showcase good practices and inspiring examples for the Women Peace Security agenda. And today's dialogue will be about women, peace, security, and religion. With this session, Cordaid and the CSPPS, supported by the Knowledge Platform for Security and Rule of Law, aim to kickstart the discussion around the positive role that religion can play for enhancing the women, peace, security agenda. In a bit, we will hear new perspectives on the nexus between women, peace, security, and religion. And most importantly, concrete examples and also good practices and recommendations to further work on this topic. You are all invited to also share your ideas and questions via the chat or via the Q&A box. If you like to tweet, you could use the hashtag #KeyVoicesWPS or hashtag WPS2020. It's also in the chat. Please be aware that this event will be recorded and also live streamed. A recording of the session and a report of the series of events will be available afterwards. So in a bit, we will gain more insight in the work of Cordaid on the nexus of WPS and religion, but let me first introduce you to Hannah Scheffer. Hannah Scheffer is currently an intern for Cordaid on gender peace security. And now my own screen is gone, so sorry. Yes, thank you so much. I need it for the introduction for Hannah. So Hannah is an intern at Cordaid with a background in Middle Eastern studies and international relations. And during her internship, she wrote a policy brief about the women, peace, security agenda and religion, of which she will present her main findings today. Hannah, the floor is yours.
Yes, on the floor. Thank you for this introduction. It is an honor for me to speak to all of you today for this side event, and I'm very happy to present the main findings of the research that Anne Kwakkenbos and myself conducted during my internship. So if we can go to the first slide. I want to first start with a short introduction of the research and to give some context as to the why and how of this research. And for the why, I want to give Anne Kwakkenbos the floor. So Anne, can you tell us why you wanted to further dive into the nexus of women, peace and security and religion?
Thank you so much, Hannah. And I'm really glad we have the chance to present this to everyone. My name is Anne Kwakkenbos and I work as an expert on gender, peace and security at Cordaid. And as was already said, Anne and I have been working on this over the last few months or even year. One of the things we found out, I mean, Cordaid is a faith-based organization. We work in the most difficult context in the world, and we work often also with faith-based partners. But if you look at the women, peace and security agenda, religion is not always taken into account. And often it is seen as more a barrier than actually a tool to advance women, peace, security. So seeing that this is the daily reality of a lot of the partners and colleagues we work with, this is the daily reality of a lot of people we are trying to support in our work, I felt that we really needed to dive more into this subject and figure out how and if there was potential for religion to advance the women, peace, security agenda. When I started to think about that a little bit, I actually ran into Hannah, who was also very interested in the subject, and together we started to dive into this. And we found that not just Cordaid, but several other organizations are working on this, but that it is not necessarily always brought together yet. And that was the reason why we started with this initiative. Thank you, Hannah.
Yes, thank you, Anne. So that is where I came in, and I just wanted to quickly introduce how I conducted the research, because in the basis, the policy paper has an academic part, because we conducted literature research on the topic, but we wanted to provide a really practical part in the policy paper as well by giving practical recommendations and tools for practitioners. So we started interviewing different colleagues within Cordaid, but also outside of Cordaid. We also organized a focus group discussion with various experts from various organizations. And thereby we tried to grasp all the different perspectives we heard and we read. And in this, we noticed that all the perspectives differ by virtue of the character of the organizations they work in, but also by virtue of a focus either on the more positive side of the topic, by engaging more with the opportunities they saw, but also some people are more focused on the challenging side of this topic by engaging more with the obstacles. And we believe that this indicates how important the conversation is and therefore also the research. We also wanted to share that this is still work in progress because we don't have all the answers, and this is exactly why this conversation is really important. And we are here to learn as well and really look forward to your contributions. So during our research, we found that there are various discourses on religion, and mostly people perceive religion as harmful sometimes to gender equality and women's rights because of patriarchal religious institutions, and thereby it might be some sort of a taboo topic. And this means that, especially in terms of opportunities, the religion inside the WPS agenda is not often discussed. And our basis for doing research, however, is regardless of those obstacles and difficulties, that there might be opportunities as well. So we have two arguments for this. First is that religion constitutes a significant element of daily life of many people worldwide. So to not engage with religion does not really make sense then. And also we found that religion might constitute potential to further the WPS agenda, besides, of course, the obstacles we already mentioned. And therefore, it's also very important to engage with the topic and to find practical recommendations to harness this potential. So these two arguments provided the basis for this policy paper, but also for this wonderful side event, and hopefully for many more conversations to come. So if we can go to the next slide. Instead of going through the entire policy paper now, I want to give you some main takeaways. And if you're interested, you can read the entire policy paper. One of my colleagues will share the link in the chat, and you can also find it on the Cordaid website. So I first wanted to dive into some good practices. Those were found in the case study research and also in various interviews. And the policy paper really elaborates on 3 case studies: Libya, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. And for now, I will only mention some examples from those case studies. So if you want to read further into that, you can open the policy paper. So the first good practice we found is that knowledge is key. We found that knowledge is very important, and you can look at that from 2 angles. First, our own knowledge about religion is very important. So there's often a lack of understanding of a local context and the meaning of religion in the daily lives of people in that local context. And that might form an obstacle for meaningful engagement and successful interventions. And secondly, also for example, women's rights activists within their communities, it is very important to be knowledgeable on religion, to be able to counter arguments of exclusion based on religious interpretations, for example. So to illuminate this a bit, I want to share a quote from Asma Khalifa, a Libyan women's rights activist I interviewed. She's told me that I have to engage with scripture, with the hadith. It gives me knowledge on how to respond. It provides me with arguments. When women are excluded from peace processes, it is often based on the text from the hadith, and we need to counter argument. To be able to answer this exclusion, you have to have knowledge on religion and religious texts. Any woman getting into this field should know this and to be able to discuss this. So if we can go back, this also links to my next good practice, which is listen to strategies of women in conflict settings themselves. This is also important because women have dealt with patriarchal religious institutions, and they also often find ways to counter this. So to listen to them and is to give them a voice and to give them the lead. And rather than telling those women what to do, we should support their efforts to find gender injustice based on conservative religious interpretations. And important to mention also is that there might be on a local level different meanings of feminism, for example, or gender equality or gender justice. So religious feminism might look differently than our expectations we have from our European or Western background. And that's fine as well. So the next point also links with this. I said look at language in the PowerPoint, but I mean that terminology is also really important in this sense. For example, words like gender equality or feminism might have a negative connotation in local religious contexts. And it might help to use a word that is more context or culturally appropriate, like, for example, gender justice. So this is also something to be aware of. So my next good practice is to bring a moderate religious leader. So one of the main points of this research is that it is all about the different interpretations and that we should look for the more moderate or progressive ones if we want to harness the potential of religion for the WPS agenda. A bit of a spoiler maybe. And it is also of value to work with religious leaders because of their important positions often within society and within their communities. Therefore, they often have authority. And if we can find religious leaders that convey such a more moderate or progressive message, they really can reach out to the communities and send a message of gender justice. And I found an interesting example from South Sudan, in which UNICEF worked with religious leaders to fight against early or child marriage, which is seen as a harmful practice. So they worked together with moderate religious leaders that could spread a message to the communities and to the parents to educate them on the detrimental effects of early marriage and to speak out against it. And this example has been successful in many ways. So such examples are really promising, I think. So another good practice brings me to a visual 2 slides further. Can you change the slides, please? Yes, perfect. So my next good practice is that it is important to distinguish between the different forms of religion. In this visual, this is really visually really nice put. So at the basis, there is the more local level of personal spirituality, which might be a tool for inspiration for people for positive change, to work for positive change. But there is also the community of faith in which people together experience their religion. And there is the often the hierarchical or patriarchal institutions. And it is important because it might be easier to ally, for example, with individual people or communities of faith instead of the more patriarchal institutions. So it is important to have knowledge on these different forms of religion and also to know how they might be interconnected. If we can go back to the other slide. Yes, so there's one more good practice, and that is to use dialogue. One other main finding of the research is that there are so many actors involved and so many stakeholders, and that they're all interested in discussing this topic. And that means that dialogue is really important, both on the international level between practitioners, on the local level, and in between the levels. So dialogue is really important to really understand each other and to understand the context and the underlying problems and obstacles as well. So from these good practices, we found several key recommendations that I want to share with you as well. And if we can go to the slide of key recommendations. Yes, perfect. So I think I have not enough time to dive into all of them, but I have chosen 3 main key recommendations that I want to illuminate today. And for the other ones, you can read the policy paper. So the first most important key recommendations is that we should keep programs and responses bottom up. So especially in this topic in which history of cultures is really important, for example, colonial heritage, it is important to keep interventions and programs bottom up instead of top down. This also connects good to the practice of listening to women's own strategies. So by working with religious leaders and women's rights activists on a more grassroots level, and this more bottom up, it is easier to build relationships and to reach out to communities to affect change. And this is also important for legitimacy of such programs and interventions. The third key recommendation really connects well, which is that we should keep programs led by women. So in order to make a program as transformative as possible, it is very important that programs are led by local people and especially women, also to best align with the local circumstances and to give room for women's own strategies to deal with obstacles in this sense. And fourthly, we have to recognize our own background. And we found in this research that religion and the place of religion within society is in many European contexts very different than in other settings worldwide. This is due to specific historical developments, which I will not explain now. But because of this different place of religion in these societies, this might have consequences for our own understanding. So in other words, reservations we have about religion and the place of religion within the WPS agenda, and to focus therein on obstacles rather than opportunities, might be traced back to this background. And the research indicates that we should be aware of that to enhance our understanding. So to conclude, if we can go to the concluding slides. Yes. Our main conclusion is firstly that this is a very important conversation that we should keep having, and we should include in this conversation all stakeholders that are present in the nexus. And one of the most important lessons from the policy paper is that religion in its many forms is not inherently good or bad for the position of women and their peace and security needs. So while religious interpretations and institutions may be patriarchal and form the basis for excluding women from either decision-making power or leadership, this is not always the case. And this makes it all the more relevant for all stakeholders to gain an understanding of religion and to provide counter-arguments against obstacles and exclusionary practices. So we have to look for progressive interpretations to make sure that to keep programs and interventions also bottom up and women-led, and to listen to women's own strategies, interpretations, and ideas. So thank you for your attention, and I give the floor back to Anne.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you so much for your very interesting insights and recommendations, and also very important to learn that integrating religion and women peace security work always needs to be bottom up and women driven, and that we as international stakeholders also need to recognize our own backgrounds and perspectives. Yes, thank you so much. Okay, I would like to invite Florence Andrews and Fidel Jebba to provide their first reflections on the research and the recommendations. Florence Andrews is, well, you are a chairperson of the Support Trust for African Development, STAT, and also the founder and former chairperson of the Southern Sudanese Women's Association in the Netherlands. We are excited to hear your perspectives from your work in the context of South Sudan and also Uganda. Florence, the floor is yours.
Admit. Okay, well, thank you so much, Hannah, for that comprehensive presentation and especially the focus on the good practices and then the recommendations. It is true that we need to engage, with all stakeholders, whether they're religious leaders or government leaders, whatever you call them, because we are one entity, and we all live in the same planet. So this starting research should be an ongoing process to go deeper into some of the things that maybe have not been looked at. And my observation will not that indeed is a very sensitive topic to discuss about, because different religions have different settings, different backgrounds, and different approaches. But as a human rights activists, as people who are working for equality, we need to not fear to go deeper into addressing root causes of some of this misunderstanding. I know people normally will say, oh, that's foreign, this is not how we are, we had our own cultures, we had our own, those ones will be there, but if we don't address them, they'll always become a tool not to progress as we have stated. But I think the outcome of this research are really good, and we need to look deeper into especially when we talk about mind of your own background, where you come from, because some of us have moved a lot. Depends on which background are you talking about now. So, and also in most cases there's this defense to say, oh yeah, it's foreign, so I think this is a very good beginning, and I hope that we can really continue dialoguing with different stakeholders, especially issues to do with the religion, whether among ourselves as the women, or among ourselves, among women with the religious leaders, or with the stakeholders like governments. So if we really need to advance the women and peace security, we should not shy away from painful or what they always call taboo values that need to be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. I think it's very clear what you say. We shouldn't be afraid to enter this WPS and religion nexus and have the discussion. I would also like to invite Fidel to reflect on Cordaid's recommendations. Fidel Jeba, you live in Cameroon and you are the founder and president of Association Rayon de Soleil. And Association Rayon de Soleil, and I miss my my introduction again. Yes, thank you. I will put it on other screen. Association Rayon de Soleil aims at promoting leadership and participation of girls and women in decision making. And we are also very curious to hear your perspectives from your work and activism in Cameroon. Fidel.
Hello, are you getting me now?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, Fidel, go ahead.
Hello, are you getting me?
You're loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm really having a serious internet issue here. So trying to connect and reconnect. So I lost you at some point. Can you come back? Did you ask any question?
No, just your first reflection on the research, please.
Okay. Thank you. So I've listened to the research, to the presentation. So the first remark I want to make here is that I'm happy that you actually decided to choose this topic, religion, because we are not used to discuss on religions when we talk on peace and security. But in our country, actually, we know that religion plays a great role because almost all Africans actually belong to one religion or another. So it is important that we put it together, that is religion and peace, especially the women and peace and security agenda. So from your presentation, from the research, I was really happy you mentioned the aspect of knowledge. That is, knowledge is key, because in our country, the women peace and security agenda is really recent. It is only for the past 5 years that we have started talking about women peace and security. So the first challenge to overcome now is actually to make people know that there is such agenda. So knowledge is key. Women should know that there is such agenda, such a resolution. Those religious leaders also should know that actually there is such paper that they can work on. So knowledge is actually a key. And then you also mentioned that it is important to focus on spirituality rather than religion institutions. So this also is very good, because when we focus more only on institutions, there is a problem. But if you work on people, that is working on their personal understanding of the issue, or when you work directly with them with their personal leadership, and they will know better what to do. But if you say, okay, we want to work with Muslim women, then there is a problem. But if you work with women who are Muslim, then you and who are leaders, then you can actually make them do something, and they understand that they are women before being Muslim or Christians. So those are the two issues actually you raised, and I'm really happy you mentioned it. And then the issue of the good practice on religious moderate religious leaders. So we are happy that in Cameroon we have a very good example of how really like Muslim and Christian leaders came together and establish an organization they call Interfaith Dialogue Association. So each time they meet together, they have common activities. And this is a practical case we need to encourage in this context, to know that there are people who are really moderate in their views. Like we have also very good examples in the villages where during the attacks, Muslims organized themselves to protect Christians, where Christians organized to protect Muslims when they were praying. All those examples are good to mention, so that we know that it is not impossible to work with those religious leaders. There are those who are really moderate. So maybe I can stop here just to give my view on the research. Actually, I think it is very good, a very good research. We needed actually to discuss on it.
Thank you so much, Fidel. And also very interesting indeed that you say it's really good to focus on the people instead of on the institutions. Thank you so much. May I ask both of you, Fidel and Florence, from your experience, you already mentioned that within both South Sudan and Cameroon, religion matters in when peace security work. It plays a big role in society. Can you maybe, and I would like to maybe ask Florence first, what is the added value that you have found in your work to create alliances with religious stakeholders? I think you need to unmute, Florence.
Okay, thanks. This is a very tricky question, the added value of religion. And I will speak from a personal experience. I mean, for me, religion is really part of religion or values, a part of my life. And I think these values really help one to redefine its daily engagements in a life based on the practices that are found in this particular religion that you belong to. It helps you actually to develop those core principles that guide your daily decision making, and it also can help you in taking decisions, whether wrong or right, if you can reflect on them. And yes, certain decisions, I mean, religious teachings may be a hindrance, but it helps you really, like what has been outlined in the research, having that knowledge and trying to educate yourself, try to listen to the strategies. So to me, religious values really have a value added because they teach you to be compassionate. If you have to compassionate, means you have to stand with those who are in need, those who are hurting, those who are broken-hearted. It teaches you to show to relate to people in a better manner. That's why we talk about unity, we talk about respect. If you want people to treat you well, then you have to learn how to treat people well. It also,
and can you, Florence, maybe also elaborate more on how you in your work create alliances with religious stakeholders? So, and is that of added value for your work?
I think it's added value for me, creating alliances, whether it is with the religious sectors or leaders or with the stakeholders. It will be like a state, what have you. It requires building partnerships. It requires collective work, and it requires, understanding where you're coming from, what you want to achieve. So if you build partnerships, you can build alliance, like what we are doing as women. We have to come collectively. So having those alliances will also help you to identify, like what has been outlined in the research, getting those moderate leaders, those who are open-minded, but of course among the local people, among the leaders. So in principle, we should not only look at religious leaders as the only people who are faith-based. All of us, whether you believe in one religion or you go to church, you pray, I think we're all actors in one way or the other. So you need those alliances. And we need to differentiate between pastor or a doctor or Florence. If you talk about the office, that is the pastor. If you talk about Florence, that's me. So if you talk about Pastor Florence, that means you are talking about the position I hold within that institution. So in that way, you can also look what kind of position is held by who and how can I work together with them. I think building alliances requires really working together in the partnerships, understanding the context you are working in, and also communicating the language that really can bring people together instead of rather than dividing people.
Thank you so much, Florence. May I also ask you, Fidel, and you were already referring to that in your first reflection. One of the key recommendations is to find progressive or supportive allies when engaging with religion for the Women Peace Security agenda. How do you go about when creating alliances, and what are the risks and what might be opportunities? Fidel, could you elaborate on that?
Okay, yes, like about the creating alliances. In our organization, we always work with religious leaders. Like when we go to the communities, like for the raising awareness activities, for training sessions, for everything we do, the first thing is to identify the leaders in those communities. And the first actors are the traditional leaders and the community, the religious leaders. So the added value is that those leaders actually are those people who can impact their communities. They have this capacity, this power to mobilize the community. They have this power to transfer the message we want. So even this power to mobilize people. So each time you involve them, each time you explain to them actually what is needed, what is expected from them, and what you want to do, they can actually very good allies to help you achieve your project. But we also, there is also a challenge because not all leaders, actually religious leaders, really participate or they contribute. You may find those who actually do not share your views, especially when you work on women leadership, and then but you need to push again so that they understand actually what you're doing. And then that is the I don't know, your past experience as an organization is also an asset. That is, when they already know that your organization has been doing this for a long time, then they are likely to adopt or to accept what you bring. So it is about your leadership as women leader actually to involve them, to work with them. So we will work a lot with this organization I just mentioned, that is the civil society platform for Muslim and Christian leaders. So this is a very good platform. Each time you contact them, they are best placed actually to put in contact with the imams in the villages, with the pastors in the villages. So it is very important that they exactly know what you want to do, who you are. That is also important, who you are, who is at the leader of your organization, what you do. So you need to work on yourself first before you address those sensitive issues on peace and security, especially when you work in those rural communities. So building alliances actually is a strategy. You need to find the strategy that works.
Thank you so much, Fidel. Very clear. I would also want to know from, because I think that's a fundamental question for many women peace security activists who also are diving into this nexus. Can you be a religious, or can you work on religion, and can you be religious and a feminist? So can it be both? Florence, can I ask you that first? You're muted.
Mute myself. Well, can you be religious and feminist? Yes and no. I think it depends on what kind of feminist you are. Are you a radical, liberal, Marxist, socialist, cultural, or ecofeminist? And what kind of religious beliefs do you believe in? Do you carry those women leaders or religious leaders who don't believe in abortions, don't believe in women being heads of the house, what have you? So in principle, you can't be a feminist and you can't be religious because what is feminism? Feminism actually allows people to look at the world as it is, men and women, and they are actually advancing the call for equality, for people to be treated equal. You don't need to segregate, you don't need to discriminate, the inclusiveness. And that is also what feminist is, depending on what kind of feminist is. And religious values, as I said before, they also emphasize of unity, working together, loving each other, and respect. So you can't be both, because what happens is either you are a Christian feminist, or you are a religious feminist, or you are none. Either you believe in humanity. It depends on your core values, your principles. So you can't combine both unless you decide to say, no, I don't believe in LGBTs, I don't believe in women leadership, I don't believe this. Then that's where you cannot combine both. But at the same time, some religious leaders also don't believe they are source of oppressing women. So in principle, you can't be both, or you cannot be both.
Thank you so much, Florence. So yeah, also depending on the types of feminism, but also the way you're spiritual or religious might also depend on it. Fidel, I'd also like your perspective on that.
Okay. My perspective is almost the same, but actually with a little difference. I am a religious leader, and I'm also a feminist. I think the word here in our context is the meaning we give to feminism. What is all about feminism? People, when you come out, you say you are feminist, then there is a problem. But if you come, you say, okay, I'm working to promote or to defend women's rights, then people are more likely to welcome you. So you can be like a feminist without saying that you're actually a feminist, because people don't like that word feminist. But I'm a Christian leader. I work with a Christian youth movement. I have responsibility in my church, and I also a civil society activist. I work on as a feminist on women issues. Then, as also Florence mentioned, as a feminist, you need to select, to choose in which domain you want to work, because there are issues you cannot mix. If you are like a Christian, as I am feminist, so there are issues like we work on gender-based violence and all those issues, but we cannot actually accept other issues that are totally opposed to the core values we share in our religion. That's the thing. But you cannot stand, like last time we were having a discussion on the sexual and reproductive health. That is, they want us to go in the villages and tell young girls to start using the condom. We cannot do that because, like, it's telling the people that, okay, you can encourage the girls to having sex, whereas you know that your religion does not permit that. But the message we can bring to that is to tell them, okay, you can like you can practice abstinence and all those messages that actually comply with our values as Christians. So it's up to you actually as a feminist to decide what you want to do, and then to also see your target, who you want to influence, who you want to impact. So it is when we come with this etiquette of feminist, all the understanding in our society, when you say you are a feminist, is that you are fighting men, you are there to like to impose things, you are not obedient, and then they will not actually welcome you. So it is the way, as I said, mentioned earlier, it is about the strategy, and then to be clear about the topics you work on, then they will accept you or reject you.
Yes, thank you, Fidel. So
yeah,
there might be some limitations to being both, and you might have to choose your topics and also your focus. Are there some other barriers to integrate religion in WPS security intervention? Florence, back to you. Unmute yourself, yes.
Yeah, well, I think in every institutions, there are always barriers. There can be barriers either for as an individual, there can be barriers on the situation, there can be barriers on how the organization is set up. We also experience barriers in the implementation of 1325. And when I started looking at religion and the state, you know, it's like this is the state, this is the government, this is politics, this is the religious leaders, and then you look at those values. Where do they differ? Where do they? So for me, I look at the changes that since 1325 has been created, and how we've been working so hard to look at the theory of change, to look at this is not working, we need to include the men, we include the youth, no, we need to include us. So you start looking at, okay, are we addressing human beings as human beings? Because we know that changes is very difficult. Or do we need to solve human beings as mathematics or as a problem? And if you look at maybe my sister who is a pastor can help me. I love the song of Peter Andre about mysterious girl. And when I hear that song, I said, is human beings mysterious? If human being is mysterious, that is not a problem. So I think most of the time we focus so much in trying to change people instead of trying to look at what is that we can do, because you can't solve human beings as a problem. So if we cannot solve problem, we need to look at what kind of faith, what kind of strategy, like what they have said, we can do. So in most cases, I think we need to look at if I can't change behavior, it takes long, I need to change my approach, how I think, look at the best of out of people, you know. So it is a very challenging as I devolve spiritually, and as I work on practical issues, I start questioning myself. When something happens, always we say, oh, choose love over hate. So you get this white and black, the bad and the good, you know. But who is the good, who's the bad? And politicians fill the church. We pray in the church for politicians to be good leaders. So you start wondering, the churches need money to do their work. The politicians need the votes of the church goers, whatever it is. So it's a very delicate kind of a situation. But I think in every situation, God is in it, and God can turn even those who are anti-Christians to become to advantage, as the way we have turned some men to advance our movement in implementing 1325.
Thank you, Florence, for your contribution. So the barriers and also maybe the opportunities might be as diverse as people themselves are. Fidel, do you want to provide your perspective on what can be barriers to integrate religion and win peace, security, intervention? Fidel, are you there?
That is okay. Barriers. Yeah, I'm there. I'm there. Okay. That is this. Yeah, you're asking about the barriers in implementing a women, peace, and security agenda. So one of the barriers we can mention here actually is the lack of female leadership. We have actually in Cameroon thousands of women organizations, but less than 5% of those women organizations actually work on development or on peace or decision-making process. Almost all of those organizations where we have millions of women, they actually are focusing only on economics, like running, doing savings, having loans and debt, but they are not really interested when we talk about peace, when we talk about decision making. So that's the first challenge. We actually need to empower those women to let them understand that they actually have to move from what they already know, what they already do, to start involving, engaging in those decision making, especially related to peace. So the first barrier is lack of leadership, and there is no leadership because they don't have the good information. They don't even know that they actually have something to do. In our country, we have already been taught that politics is not for Christians, is not for Muslim. Politics is for politicians. Politics is not for youth, is not for young people. Politics is for politicians. So even in the church, you find other leaders who would tell you that you don't have to go, you don't have to vote, you don't have to stand for any position, to run for any office, because you just have to pray God. And that's another thing. But we need to change actually the narrative now and tell them, no, a church is in the society and we need those people actually to participate. So when we mentioned that knowledge is key, we need to tell those people, those leaders, that they actually belong to a society where they have to participate, not only mobilizing people and pray. So that's the first challenge we need to overcome. And I think maybe the problem is because we say it is politics. They don't like the term politics. We prefer to say, okay, a participation in decision making, then it makes sense. But when you say participating in politics, so it's a barrier. So we need to find a way actually to involve them, to let them understand that, okay, when you go for a vote, or a pastor can stand to be a mayor in his community, I'm not sure that there is any scripture that forbid this, but they need to know that they actually can do that. So I think it's all about narrative. So another thing is also about the courage. You know, women actually face a lot of challenges. We want women to be leaders, but there are their personal challenges back home. They have to struggle to take care of their families. So they prefer addressing those issues rather than participating in anything else. So that's another thing. I think the most important thing here is about knowledge, making them get interested in those agenda. That's why from the past 5 years now, since we have this WPS in Cameroon, women, I'm not sure that 10% of women organizations actually know that this agenda exists. So we still need to do more awareness, raising awareness, so that they know there is something, and then they need to appropriate, they need to take it and do something with it. So the barrier actually, I think, is working on women and working on those religious leaders to make them understand that they have something to do.
Okay, thank you, Fidel. And so if you would refer back also to your own work, could you give some practical recommendations on what needs to be in place if you want to integrate religion in women, peace, security work?
Just that?
Okay, that one of the recommendations
Fidel, yes.
here. Sorry?
Yes, Fidel, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Okay. One of the recommendations I can say here is actually raising awareness. We need to vulgarize, I don't know how to say it, this agenda, this women, peace, and security. We need to make every leaders, like women leaders, to know that there is this resolution exists. And then we already have a national plan of action elaborated by some civil society organization and the Ministry of Women Affairs and the Family. But I don't know how many organizations do know that it exists. So the first thing is organize platforms, seminars, conferences to explain what it's all about, so that they know exactly how to implement that plan of action already established. That's the first thing. The second thing is to build women leadership. As I said, I am a Christian leader because I work with young people. So every time I have conferences with young people here and there. So the feeling I have is that, like, they are totally disconnected with the reality. They don't even know what is going on around them. So we need actually to go there, organize such meetings, telling them that, okay, no, you belong to church, you're a Muslim, but you still belong to a society, and this is the kind of leadership we need. And then our God is not against this kind of leadership. Our God will not stop a woman actually to stand a leader and help her community. So when you adopt that kind of narrative, then they listen and they know that they can actually do something. For me, it's capacity building, and then sharing the message, the information about what we want to achieve actually. So the two things are very, very important.
Thank you so much, Fidel. Florence, would you also have some practical recommendations from your work? So what needs to be in place to integrate religion and women, peace, security interventions?
Before I give my suggestions, I'd like to comment on two key things. I agree with what Fidel said, that we need to educate people, they need to get information, they need to be conference, and you see, we should not, I work with the local communities. I work with people with very low education who lack the materials. But I live here in the Netherlands, where you have access to information. You have access. The issue is when it comes to bridging the gap between politics and women, and 95 years to bridging the gap between women politics. Netherlands, and you can correct me, is about 46, number 46 in that gap. USA is 86. So if we start comparing the advanced countries where they're educated, they have access for freedom of speech, they can read, they can participate, you start asking yourself, is it only a problem really affecting us who are in the third world country or developing countries, or who are working with the grassroots problem, who lack the access? Or is something that's happening? If you look at churches, women fill the churches. They take a very great role in the churches. But when it comes to the leadership, thank God now some churches are now ordaining female priests, are also accepting the same sexual sex marriages, accepting LGBTs. So you start to wonder, it takes me back to really, who are we, and how do we advance this? So if we look at this, a country like South Sudan is also doing well. It depends how you don't compare, but compare it. You look at Rwanda, look at Burundi, separate countries. So I think it is a long way, but we are progressing. Having said that, it is true that we need to continue the dialogue, and I believe that we're all ambassadors. You know, you know what an ambassador is. You know, ambassador is sent to a country, you know, to go and negotiate or the trade or to talk or to discuss, and the ambassador carries the flag of the country, you know, and that it goes with the power. So that power gives him that authority either to create peace or to create a war. So if we are all ambassadors in the biblical text, we are supposed to be carrying the word of God. We are supposed to be doing the right thing. So we need to continue engaging in the discussions based on the and my recommendation
And your
will be.
final recommendation, Florence?
I'm
So we
coming
need to
to
be
it.
ambassadors. What
I'm coming to it that.
practical recommendation?
Yeah, I'm coming to you. Yeah, you know, we are all ambassadors. An ambassador can be can create can create a war or can create peace. So if we, as ambassadors of the gender and peace and security, I mean in the women and peace security, do not do what we preach or what we say, then we are likely to be those ambassadors that can go and misrepresent the country. So we need to really stick to what we say, and we need to continue the dialogue, like what Fidel has said, so that we can discuss issues that can bring us together. And I think we need to build trust, credibility, and accountability. If you look at all these names, we're talking about meaningful engagement. You can't be meaningfully engaged, you can't be inclusive when in paper it is, but in practice not. So we really need to look at our strategy. Are we being inclusive enough? Are we being a good ambassadors to those who don't have access? Because sometimes people listen, but they don't read. So
Thank you so much, Florence.
yeah.
Thank you. I'm also looking at the Q&A in the chat, and I think there's also a question from Amber Bell, and she asked how to deal with the absence of women in positions of religious authority, institutions that are a necessary step to achieve full gender equality. Sorry, or no, is that a necessary step to achieve full gender equality? So how to deal with the absence of women in positions of religious authority? Maybe, Fidel, can I ask you to reflect on that? Is Fidel still with us? I don't see or hear Fidel. Maybe Florence, can you maybe reflect on that? So how to deal with the absence of women in positions of religious authority?
The absence of women in religious institutions, in leadership positions, is just like the same absence of women in the secular sectors. We need to continue educating women. We need to continue to build the confidence that they can lead. We need to continue, supporting each other instead of bringing each other down, because sometimes like what has been said before, a lot of workloads keep women back. And I live here in the Netherlands. I'm very active in my church. I have been several times asked to join the council. I've turned it down because I'm comfortable being at the welcoming team, and my work is a receptionist. I don't want to go to a higher decision-making body. So can we blame the church? No, I've refused several times because I enjoy being in the welcome team. I meet different people. I interact with the people. I've met ambassadors, ministers,
But
political
Florence,
leaders.
may I
So
ask,
I
wouldn't it
like
be,
that.
yeah, but wouldn't it be a kind of a precondition or a necessary step to achieve full gender equality to have women on those positions?
But the issue is here that it cannot be a precondition. It is required that we need to achieve that. I think people should be willing to achieve those goals. We don't go for quantity, let's go for quality. And if people should be comfortable enough to say, yes, I think I can do it. I can stand up with the challenges. I can do the things they're doing. But we should not only say, oh, it's a prerequisite because we need to cover this field. We can cover with the quantity. That's what we need. And like if you look at all the educated women, powerful countries, they haven't even achieved that yet. So it is a slow process, but we need to have women in this body when they want to and whom they can, and who can really make decisions that are detrimental.
Thank you so much, Florence. Is Fidel with us again? I think I briefly saw her. Yes, Fidel. I'm also looking at other questions, but I think there's no other questions at this point. But maybe you could reflect very shortly before we follow up, before we wrap up this part. What do you think? Is it needed to have women in religious institutions at authority positions? Yes, I'm afraid her sound is not well. No. Okay. Is there still or another question from the audience, from the participants? I see one hand from Mecca. Mecca, maybe you can put it in the chat, in the Q&A. I'm not sure if we can unmute Mecca.
No, it is just a comment.
Okay.
Just a comment, or shall I put it in a?
Very short. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. It is. I'm very glad to hear all of these beautiful talks and presentation from Florence and Fidel. Thank you. And I do agree with most of it. I only have one comment or one thing to say, that because I heard from, I think, Anna, that is that for progressive religious, we need progressive religious leaders. And I think, no, I am not with that. I think we need to go to the fundamental, and we need moderate religious leaders. Of course, it is religious leaders are very, very essential in the peace, women, peace and security. And so we need moderate. If you have the progressive, then maybe you get opposite things which you don't like to have. Huh? But the moderates, they are always ready to work with women, I think, and especially with peace. And from my experience with peace making, we always go to religious leaders. We accompany them in our mediation sessions, and they do that with enthusiastic, and it gives really good sphere because they have this power, they have leadership on the communities, especially in rural areas. So I do agree with the others. Thank you. That is all I want to add.
Thank you so much, Mecca. Is there anyone else who'd like to contribute or has a question? Oh, I see another question to Hannah from Alina. In your research, did you take into account how big the support of communities is to moderate religious leaders?
Okay, my cat is in the screen. Okay, yes. Yes, thank you for your question, Alina. I think it's a very good question. Yes, I think we took it into account to a certain extent, but I also really like the point Mecca made that there is a difference between progressive, moderate, and maybe more conservative. And I think if a leader is too progressive, it might not align well with the majority of the opinions of the community. So I believe that in our research, we try to use the term moderate, but sometimes I confused both. So that might have happened in my presentation. And I think it is really important to balance in this sense, so to not have to also align well with cultural and religious context in which you work, and to align with the needs and the views of the communities you work in. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, thanks. I see from Alina. So thank you. And I also see a question from Esther. She asked whether, so there many efforts are focusing on the local level, community projects, etc. But how to make a more institutional change. I could ask it to you, Hannah, but maybe also Florence. Maybe first, Hannah.
Yes, I think this is also a very important question and one that we still struggle with also. So as I included in the presentation, sometimes it's easier to align with the personal experiences of people in their spirituality, and institutions can be quite difficult to engage with. And I think this is one of the questions we still have as well. So I'm really curious to hear Florence or Fidel on this question.
Okay, Florence.
Well, as I said before, that any work, especially any movement or alliance or work to dismantle structural injustice or gender inequality needs partnership, you know. And you need to understand whom you are working with, you know, to dismantle those structures. And if you have to start really by yourself. Who are you? Are you part of it? Are you contributing, or are you an obstacle? You know, and how best can you align? So to really to create those kind of to change structural justice, I mean structural institutions is not easy. That's where, I mean, we all know how we are struggling in institutional I mean injustice reforms, security reforms, all these things we're asking for reforms because they also, you know, apply to Christian institutions, religious institutions. It's not that easy. The easy thing is the mindset of the people. If we can gradually, you know, change the mindset of people and to really understand what is at stake, then gradually we can dismantle some of this. And you know, it's not it's simple if you are the victim. In most cases, if you look at the conflict situations like South Sudan, Darfur, Burundi, whatever it is, women who are raped or children who are killed, it is always the victims who are supposed to take that approach. And what you have to do is healing. You need to start with that healing. That healing is part of the process of peace building. And it may be so hard, you know, but it can happen. And if you look at what happened with the death of George Lloyd, it touched almost everybody nationwide. And I think it's a challenge even business people who are profit oriented. What can we do? How can the leaders be a part of the healing? And that's where the institutional change will come into. What are we doing wrong, or what are we doing right? So it's difficult but doable.
Thank you so much, Florence. I think we have Fidel back. Fidel, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm there.
Hi. Would you want to give your reflection on a question of Stephen? He asked how to engage and include men in this discussion.
That is to include men?
Yes.
In the discussion. Oh, that's a very interesting question, because we are currently working on such a project in the Fano region, working on the he for she approach. Because in our context, we finally realized that for the past year, we are working a lot with women on gender-based violence, and where the perpetrators are men. So now we need to change the strategy because our boys are not actually taught on how to deal with women, with the girls actually. The education is more focused on girls, how to be a good wife, how to be a good mother. So we now actually have to train even young boys and men so that they can be he for she advocates. So I think this is an approach we have to experiment now, so that they know that is the fight for women peace and security should not be only women affairs. That is, men are leaders in a patriarchal society. They also need to know that women are there and give them the space. But for that, we need to explain them. We need to engage them. We need to tell them how women actually are facing all those challenges. So I think it's all about women leadership, how we women leaders can approach the men. I mentioned the strategy about strategies. How can we actually engage the men so that they can be those advocates, those champions for a women peace and security agenda? I think it is up to us. They will never stand and start working for women peace and security. It requires we female leaders to go to them and discuss with them. And then the other thing I also want to mention here is that this message is addressed to donors. We have this barrier, this challenge in our context here is that when you have a project on religion, most of the donors actually are not interested in working on religion. That is, if you have a project working with Muslim youths, with Christian youths, they are not interested. So we find ourselves leaving this great amount of young people who we can work with. So we need to find ways actually to tell the donors that we can find more and more young people in those communities. So even the young men, we can start changing the narrative with young people in the communities. One other thing about the strategy actually is to train the young girls. And this is what our organization is doing now. We have what we call the Girls for Peace initiative. We come to realize that when women, when they're already married, they have other needs. That is, they're married, they have to take care for the family. But we have young girls who are 15, 14, 16. We can start empowering them. We can start building their leadership so that before they get married, they start doing something and they continue to advocate whether they are married or not. But when you want to start working with women who are already married and have another kind of challenges, it becomes very, very difficult. Like now, it's very difficult to involve my mother, who is already 60 years old, like to start asking her to be a leader or to do something. No, but when they are 15, 20, I think it is the very good age we start building their leadership so that like in the 10 coming years, they can actually do something. This is my view on that.
Yes, thank you, Fidel. So engage the young women as soon as possible to become the leaders of the future.
Yeah,
It's also a good bridge to the question of Lotfi. And he asked, how can we support women to reach the SDG 10 of the 2030 agenda? And SDG 10 is on inequality, so reducing inequalities. It's a very broad question, but perhaps you would like to give your perspective on that, Fidel.
That is reducing inequalities among women and men. Mm-hmm. The first thing is about education. It's about education. We need to continue to fight against all forms of discrimination against women, against the young girls. I come from a community where those cultural practices still exist, like early and forced marriages, like FGM, all those kind of things where the girls are withdrawn from school to get married at 12, 13. Those practices still exist, and those are the practices that create the inequality. Like we need to give our daughters the chance actually to have access to quality education. We cannot reduce this inequality when we don't have women who are educated. As Florence just mentioned, like in her church, they asked her several times to have access to a leadership position, and then she was not ready to take that position. So that's all about education. How our girls are being educated? How the boys are educated to be leaders, but not the girls. That's where we need to change. And then even if we want to reduce the inequalities, and then you ask, when the women or the girls themselves, they don't know what to do. So what do you explain there? They can give you a position and you yourself, you know that you cannot do anything at that position. So it's about education, it's about acquiring a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge so that you can it's about empowerment at all. That is giving them the opportunity actually to stand to those positions so that they can reduce the discrimination and the inequalities. And the inequalities are at every level, not only education, even on the society. If women are not empowered, if you are economically dependent, then you cannot do anything. So they are, as you said, it's a very broad question.
Yes, but thank you so much for your reflection on it, Fidel. And I would like to thank both.
Anna?
Yes, Florence, very short.
Okay, I'll try my best to be very short. I think, sorry. It's a very broad question, but for me, I always like to look at generalization of things. When you talk about inequality, and then you lump women together as if they are homogeneous, and then you put them together as homogeneous. And I think we need to go down in those structures. Are men are equal? Are women equal? Do we women support each other? Do we create inequalities, among ourselves? How do we bridge those gaps? If we cannot address the inequality we create among ourselves as women, and then we just focus on men and women, while also even not the men are also equal when it comes to education, when it comes to economic, when it comes to infrastructure, then we are creating one block and then the other block, and we miss the gray areas in it. So for me, we need to be very careful when we generalize, when we talk about the women, we talk about the men and inequality. So that is my contribution.
Thank you so much, Florence. Yes, totally agree with you. Nuancing is very important. So yeah, I'd like to thank both of you very much for your insight and your reflection, Fidel and Florence. And I'd like to give the closing remarks to Anna Quakkenbos to also share some of the final ideas on the way forward for this peace, security and religion nexus. And Anne Quakkenbos works as a gender, peace and security expert at Cordaid. And in her work, Anna aims to ensure that the needs and perspectives of women's rights activists reach the relevant decision-making spaces. And before she joined Cordaid, she worked at Women Equals Men as the civil society coordinator for the Dutch National Action Plan on Resolution 1325. Anne, go ahead.
Thank you so much on the floor. And thank you so much for moderating this afternoon. Always good to have an old colleague in the room. I have to say, it's a bit hard to follow after this extremely passionate and amazing discussion. And I've been writing a lot down because even though we've been talking about this subject for the past few weeks and months, Fidel and Florence again gave new inspiration for the next steps. Like Hannah already explained earlier in this session, is how we got to the subject and why we thought it was important. And now seeing this discussion, things coming up, seeing all the questions coming in, it actually confirms the assumption we had. There's still a lot to do and to learn for all of us on this. One of the things I want to just highlight is that the words that really stuck with me after this hour and a half we just had is the empowerment part, the element of leadership, discussing power in itself, and sisterhood. And I think listening to Fidel and Florence, and also reflecting back on some of the things we've learned through the research and through the sessions we've had, I think that should be central in any step we're going to take next, being aware of the power, looking at the sisterhood and looking at this empowerment through all generations, because patriarchy is everywhere, as we all know. Like Hannah already discussed, but maybe some people joined in later, over the past year, we've been working on how we can include religion more or better in the women, peace, security agenda, and also see how we can use it for the benefits. We've done a few interactive sessions. We've done some expert sessions over the last few weeks. All of them can be found online. So maybe one of my colleagues can put the link in the chat if you haven't seen it yet. There are some amazing speakers and there are quite a few lessons learned we had from those. After the expert sessions you could watch, we also had some interactive sessions with people working in the field, but also academics, lobbyists, religious actors. All of them came into a digital room because of Corona. We couldn't meet in real life to really explore this subject further. So Marina, if you can go to the next slide. So some of the recommendations that actually came out of that on top of the paper Hannah had already worked on is really that we need to focus on male champions. Look into the positive masculinities element. As was already said, we should not only focus on men, we should also focus on women. We should look at that leadership element that was, beautifully stated by the speakers. But if we really want to change the system and see how we can break down these patterns, we need to work with these male champions. Next to that, religion, cultural backgrounds, it all has to do with the various value systems we work in and we have for ourselves. Myself, I might have a different value system than Anna Floor or the Florence or from Fidel. What is our value system and what are we working from? Understanding that, looking into that. Looking at religious texts, working together with female theologians. I'm sorry, it's the end of the day. Really diving into that. How can we use this, in a positive way? Hannah already explained it, but it came back in all these conversations. If you really dive into religious text, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is blocking things. It is how you interpret it and having these discussions. But if you want to have these discussions, you need to have safe spaces. This is a subject that's for most of us very close to our heart and it can be very personal. So creating a safe space where this can be discussed, where people do not feel attacked because they have certain views or values that were taught them from a young age, that they are not necessarily wrong, but that they can be dynamic and be used in a positive manner. And for that, you also need to build trust. You can't just walk into a situation, tell them, well, I think that you think that this says it in the Bible, so therefore we should go to the left. But if you just do it like that, then you cannot or never really create any trust, any community sense of, trying to promote it for the best. Building trust, working with existing networks and partners is crucial to really look at this subject. Okay, go to the next one, Marina. Thank you. So I have to say, it was a bit hard to all put this on the same slide. So yes, there's a lot in it. And when we started to work on this, we also really wanted to see what are the themes we want to work on? What are some of the themes that are an option to improve on? So one of the things was already discussed was looking at these masculinities, how to promote positive masculinities, looking at the religious text from a feminist perspective. One of the themes people also really want to dive into is working in the context when there is resistance from religious actors. An example, for example, are now the peace negotiations in Afghanistan. How can we do this properly? And this is also something that came back from the discussions between Fidel and Florence, is that, we need to work with young women and men on this and not just have the older generation dictate things. And therefore education comes in. How can we bring that in? And also a really important one, the history of cultures. Who were the ones that actually brought religion to specific places? How are they linked with slavery and the decolonization discussion? How were existing cultural traditions linked with some of the religious things that came in? Looking into the power relations. What are the potential roles of religious mediations? Mecca already brought this up. Also, family. What does family mean in a WPS security agenda? How can you actually bring that element in? How can you tackle patriarchy through religion? Looking at feminism through non-Western lenses, what was already said. A lot of people work and see views as a feminist, but do not necessarily call themselves a feminist because it can actually be harmful. And religion at the grassroots level, which I think also really came back from these discussions. But another thing we also really want to dive into in the coming months and perhaps years, conservative actors at the international level. Some of us who are in the room work in lobbying advocacy, and they're actually really being blocked by actors that might have more harm in than positive motivations. And that's something we also need to work together on as people who want to create better situations for women and men worldwide. So these are some of the themes we're going to work on with the community of practice. Can you go to the next slide, Marina? So this community of practice, please let us know, send us an email, contact us, whatever way possible, if you're interested and to further explore this subject. Because, you know, we've now had almost an hour and a half. I have 2 minutes left, and I will try to finish on time. This community of practice is just a start. This is a subject we need to dive into further. We can talk about this for hours and hours. And you saw the list of themes I just shared. There's so much more we can further dive into. So the community of practice we're going to start is really going to focus, one, on information sharing. People have done already things. How can we learn from each other? How can we bring together various actors that work on this subject, both from academic backgrounds, NGO backgrounds, grassroots level, and religious actors? How can we work together with existing COPs, for example, some of the COPs that are on the ShareNet? How can we undertake joint actions? How can we publish joint publications? How can we facilitate networking opportunities so we can actually learn from each other? And how can we involve religious actors that are currently maybe a little bit further removed from this community? So that's the plan we have for the coming months and years. This discussion was just the start. Please let us know if you're interested. We already have a great amount of really interesting people involved. And this is a discussion that might feel a little bit like an open end, but that was the idea. We cannot have an end yet to this discussion. So thank you very much for all of you attending. And I'm really, really happy we got so many people in the room, and I'm looking forward to discuss this further in the future. Thank you. On the floor, I'm leaving it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Yes, and also on behalf of myself, thank everyone for your presence and attending the session. Please do share any ideas on the way forward that you would have, or if you would like to become part of the community of practice, share that with Cordaid, and I hope to see you again in another session. Goodbye.